Hey everybody, this is Travis Pfeiffer here, coming to you with another Final Fantasy trading card game discussion. As always, I got my good buddy Brandon Laycob with me. Brandon, how you doing today?
Doing good, thanks. How are you?
Doing man, I've had a day, but you already know about it, and we're not going to go into it here. Instead, what we are going to go into is archetypes, which is something that's always been like really fun and interesting, and to me, really specific to Final Fantasy. I've definitely played this trading card game more than any others, but Archetypes kind of have a special feel in this game because, one of the things that draws people to this game is that they like the Final Fantasy video games. And so, if they're a big fan of 7 or 10 or 6 or whatever, and they'll see it, I want to play with those characters. And that's kind of more like category-based. We're going to specifically talk about archetypes, things like, monks, dragoons, etc. Because there's been some discussion about them lately. I remember I saw in one of the YYT videos and a guy saying just how archetypes in general aren't good. That they rely too much on kind of a synergy with themselves. And especially lately, I feel like they've gotten a lot better in general. And so I thought it would be fun to just kind of discuss what makes a good archetype, what makes a bad one. Is there something inherently wrong with them, like as a concept, or is it just that maybe they just don't have the right cards they need? So yeah, and I know you've played a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh! And Magic, and for them, archetypes is a lot easier to make, right? Because you can just make stuff up.
In Yu-Gi-Oh, definitely, because they just have this cards. They just make them up as they go. And basically most of what is 99% of what is played is just an archetype, and they'll just be like, hey, here's a concept, and just build around that. Like, they're just coming out with another one, then it's their content creators. It's like they can just do whatever they want and just expand on that.
Yeah, that's nice. They have that freedom, whereas obviously in Final Fantasy, it's like, well, Cloud is from Final Fantasy VII, so he has to be a Final Fantasy VII character.
They've got that specific universe they have to build off of, and it doesn't give them as much creative freedom.
Right. No, absolutely. Well, let's jump into it. The first one I will mention is one of my personal favorite archetypes in the game, and that's Scions of the Seventh Dawn. For most people who start this game, that's probably the strongest starter deck there is. And while it's never taken any super top Crystal Cup or anything, it's been competitive. It's been seen in the upper rounds of plenty of events. I know I went to top 8 at a local qualifier with it. It's a fun deck. It has haste, so anything that kind of gives all its forwards haste, you're always going to have some threat for winning. And so here's what I like about Scions is that thematically, it really fits with this theme of that they all work together, because that's what they do in the game. And its 2 big beater cards, which are Ida and Y'shtola, they have effects that say, for every Scion you control, they get such and such effect. Ida gets power, and then Y'shtola will get her second and third effect. And luckily it counts characters, so you can have a backup full of Scions, and then they're also getting buffed off of that. Because if you just had forwards, that wouldn't be so good. At Urianger 2, for every Scion forward you have that lets you bring in monsters. And I think that's one of the reasons Scions has been successful, is because the cards have removal baked into them. Ida is going to deal half her damage and power to a dull forward. Y'shtola has her nuke on attack if she's got enough. Urianger can bring back a monster, like a dragon, that can give you removal. And then their Searcher, which is fantastic, Minfilia, EX Burst Searcher, that, again, when you have enough Scions, she can break herself to take someone out. So I think that's one of the reasons Scions is successful, is because they have this kind of stuff baked into them. What do you think?
Yeah, I definitely agree. Having an EX Burst Searcher is huge for archetypes, and there's only, I think, a couple on this list, maybe 2, 3 tops, that their Searcher is not an EX Burst or not a backup, which, backups are super nice, obviously, to have. And especially one that has a built-in sweet effect that also counts your other characters and can break herself to kill a forward. That is not really something you would see on these other Searchers. And also having the Searcher itself inside its archetype, that is also huge.
Yeah.
I think there's a couple here as well that don't do that.
Oh, yeah.
Which we'll go over later. King of Burmecia and Dragoon specifically comes to mind.
Yeah,
but
Duke Altana.
that's Duke Altana, yeah. And he's also not an EX, but he also searches backups, which he's kind of a special case too.
Yeah.
But yeah, counting characters rather than forwards is what makes this archetype just much better than some of the other ones. Like the next one that we'll eventually go over.
Yeah.
We'll
Yeah, if it didn't count characters, it would be really bad. And actually, I'll bring up kind of my one issue with this archetype is that because of the way it works, it really feels like it's locked into these specific backups. Ida gets stronger. Both Ida and Ishtola's removal is tied to the number of scions you have. If you don't have enough scions, not only is Ida going to be weak herself, she's not going to deal any damage to someone when they pop. And Ishtola's got to have, what, five other ones besides herself. So
Five
because of
others.
that, that's my only complaint is that I feel like I'm locked up into the backup line, which is Alice Alphino, Minfilia, Cryo, and then Louis Swab, because you have to be able to search out Alice, because Alice is what makes the deck work. But again, like I've seen people make Scions lists and they've got Shantoto and Tyro and all these, and I'm just like, but none of those help the Scions. Like you might as well just play random cards at that point. Like unfortunately, unless they would give us new Scions, which of course we got a ton this opus, but none of them fit into this Earth Lightning deck, which is so frustrating because like I would like to see an Ida that isn't tied to, hey, maybe she's just good on her own. She doesn't need to have 8 other Scions around her, to be relevant. So that's kind of my one complaint with it. And if anything, I think that's one of the few things holding it back is that I don't think you really can get creative with your backups with that said. It's like you gotta have these ones. Minfilia, all of them require you have to have a big number of Scions. So that's kind of my one hold up with it thing. I think hurts it a bit.
Yeah, they're like you said, printing them on different colors now, but not giving you the backups to help support that. So it's
Yeah,
spread across 5 colors for some reason, and they just keep making them all as forwards, which would be nice if there was a way to just make that easier to play.
yeah. Maybe in the future they can come out with a Scion that like color fixes. That'd be interesting. Well, but in spite of all that, Scions are good. They're great. They're great for beginners. Everyone loves them. They're still fun to play. Who's not so great?
Cadets, one of the starter decks that used to be nice to pick up back in the day because it was just, you know what? It wasn't too bad. It only had, I believe, 2 colors in the deck, and I believe you had to pick up the third from Opus 3 itself.
Oh wow.
Uh, and that is the opposite of the problem that Scions has, where most of those cards count your forwards as opposed to characters, making it much harder to get your abilities to go off. They keep name clashing, which is also one of the biggest issues with archetypes like this that aren't just standard units. They have specific jobs. And their searcher is Enlightening, which they pretty much stopped printing support for cadets in Lightning in Opus
Immediately.
3
Yeah,
immediately.
the moment they did it.
The most support they got in Lightning was back up in Opus 5. There was an Agito cadet that I think reduced a card's power by 1,000 for some reason.
And none of those
Uh,
Agito cadets like work with the main cadets either.
just the one. Just the one, I believe. And yeah, the best cards in the deck are aces and rems, and they just continuously print those. I think there's like 5 aces and 4 rems right now, and all of the aces, I believe, are good.
Yeah.
2 of which are backups. So it's like, hey, there's a bunch of cadets that need to be reprinted still, like Jack with terrible effect.
Oh my god.
Their Searcher, again, Enlightening, which they don't support anymore, and is not a cadet.
Yeah.
Not an EX, doesn't help it. Name Clash, just the biggest thing with cadets.
For those who haven't played that game, there's 14 cadets. 14. They follow the card suits, and then you have Rem and Machina, and it's just like, well, they just keep making ace. And in Opus 9, there's 2 aces came out, a backup and a forward, and then another backup ace came out in Opus 10. And it was just like, and Light Ace was already one of the best like cadet forwards there was already. It's just like, why do you keep making this that backup ace in Opus 9 could have easily been Cater, because that wasn't very good. The forward rem they made is great, but there's a backup rem that's a burst that lets you recover a cadet, which you want to use, but you can't because the forward, like, I just don't get why. Yeah, they're like, all right, what if instead of 14 we only just made cards for 2 of them? Like, I don't get it.
The starter queen, EX Burst,
Yes.
counts your forwards when she enters, and honestly, you would play the other queen over that one anyway, because she actually checks to see if you have just a cadet character in play to give her first strike.
Yeah, how much that card would actually be pretty good if you have a total of like 5 cadet characters. She's going to break something on entry on a burst. That's great, but it has to be forwards. Like, that's just so hard to maintain. I don't get it. Like, but then things like the Fire Ace in Opus 9, which it wants you to play as many cadets as possible so that he can flip it. He can flip more when he reveals. But again, like, other than that, what Cease, I think, counts the characters. Almost everybody else is like, well, cadet forwards only.
Yeah. Yeah, and Ace, the Opus 9 Ace, has 2 effects on entry, one being a burst that checks, he'll dig the top 7 of your cards and grab 2 cadet characters. But then also, is it when he enters or attacks that
It's
he
when he
gets the other
attacks
effect?
that he does
When he
the
attacks,
nuke.
it's just the burst that he gets.
Yeah.
Checks counts your others or all
I
forwards?
think it's cadet forwards.
Just cadet forwards
I
to hit
think
him
it
for
counts
what?
himself. It does count himself.
Does count himself? Yeah, it counts all the forwards, which you're probably not going to be playing a lot of. I mean, you will be, but they're just much harder to get rid of, and that's why, obviously, in my opinion, having to have forwards that don't take care of themselves is much harder to do and get by with. So the effects have to be pretty strong, but just hitting something for 2K times the number of one of your forwards doesn't really seem that good.
Yeah, only when he attacks.
Yeah,
Yeah,
just him, just when he attacks.
yeah. It's rough. It's well, and you know what? There's an archetype and a new legend that came out that has a similar effect of 2K based on forwards, but because of the way that one is worded and actually structured, it makes it so much more viable than, imagine, spoilers, we'll talk about Warriors of Light. Imagine if Ferris said that. Oh, when Ferris attacks, then you can do like, that wouldn't be great at all.
Or the upcoming, eventually, Cyan that we talk about that
Yeah.
says when any of your samurais attacks get the effect. That'd be kind of nice.
Yeah, if it was just him, how crappy would that be?
And not to say that every archetype has to have abilities that only work off characters rather than forwards, because then that would just be too good.
Sure.
Obviously, we need to have some sort of balance, but I think they're just super underbalanced in cadets.
Yeah, I don't know why they can't get that. And again, like you said, they completely dropped the lightning support. We could easily use a new 9, a new queen, definitely a new jack. God, that card's terrible. But even like Machina,
Cater.
Cater, like those are in fire and they won't, like, nah, just Ace and Rem forever. It's ridiculous.
8-9 Trey, just
Yeah,
any of them.
so many of yeah. They're who knows if they'll ever do anything with them. They're drowning in misery. You know who was great though, and in Opus 11, the people always say these got single-handedly dragged forward in Opus 11 by one card, and that's Edge. We're talking about our ninjas. Throwing ninja star at the screen. Yeah, again, it was amazing how much Edge did for that archetype because, like cadets, they were across multiple colors. So one of the key things Edge says is, "Hey, I color fix. You can play with CP of any element." So now you've got these tricolor ninja decks, and they don't feel bad to play because Edge lets you fix them, and then he makes all of them cheaper. He doesn't even have the cost 0. They can cost 0. A lot of them say it can't cost below 1. Nope, you can play a 1 cost for free. And then he gets these awesome shuriken counters on top of him too anytime any ninja enters. And they started doing this in Opus 11, and thank goodness, is that it's basically job or card name ninja, because beforehand in the past, you have a lot of these like card name ninjas, card name monks, but their job is a standard unit. But then you'd have these other cards that would say like, oh, well, I'll give my favorite example, which is Hien in Samurai. He only gets his buff if a job samurai is on the field, not a card name. So I'm glad that it seems like lately they're trying to fix it. Like, okay, card name, job name, whatever, it gets that power, which is how it should be. And then Edge, and I've said this before too with like, whenever something becomes popular, like WAF did in Opus 10, even though Rain is far and away what carries WAF, it's never just the one card, because they also got the new Lan, they got Luce, they got the father, I can't remember his name off the Rorik. And think of ninjas. It didn't just get Edge, it got a new version of the Eblon 4, Geku Zengetsu, Sukanawa, and Izoye. And then they got Mena, a backup EX Burst Searcher, which, hey, you can't find that Edge? Let me just pull them out for you immediately.
And as a ninja.
Yeah, and it was a ninja. Like, great, yeah, that felt so good. Edge, turn 1, pitch a single card, get the Mena, grab whatever, like, grab the Sukanawa. And then those new cards, like, you kind of mentioned Name Clash with Cadets. These new Eblon 4, they're all pretty different from their previous versions. So you have a good, I've seen people play both the new Sukanawa and the old one, and they're both good. Our buddy Alex likes the new 3-cost one, and our buddy James really likes the old, and you can make a good case for either. When you make interesting effects like that, you don't have to say, well, obviously that's the crappy one, so you got to put like, oh no, which way do I want to go? Like, it made ninjas really exciting.
Yeah, it gives you a lot of variety, because I'm not going to lie, there's been times where I've considered playing either or of the past or the new Eblon 4. There's not too much name clash because they're mostly standard units, and there's 42 total ninja cards.
Yeah.
So there's not for lack of creativity there.
Yeah, they were great. They're great. Anything else you gonna say about ninjas? Or should we move on to the next ones?
No, I didn't touch ninjas as much as I wanted to. I did Edge, however, as balanced as he is by making him kind of weak to balance out the fact that he can get the shuriken counters. He does count by character. The only issue is if you don't see him first and get to use all of his counters
Yeah,
beforehand. Once you're fully set up, uh, he doesn't really do much after that. He just kind of sits there. He gets the maybe one, maybe two shuriken counters, but you gotta. He's one of those that you have to push all of them out there to really load up those counters so you can use them effectively to kill stuff.
yeah,
Otherwise, you just get one or two counters and maybe do 6,000 damage there,
right.
here, there. It just
Well,
doesn't sit there as much.
and speaking of throwing stuff at people to kill them, what if instead of shurikens, you actually just like grabbed your fellow friend and just threw his body at your opponent?
Don't think I haven't considered that. Are you talking about monks?
Oh, I'm talking about monks, baby.
That new Ursula that we got alongside those monk buffs, alongside the ninjas.
Mm-hmm.
One that didn't shine as much as the ninjas. Uh, they didn't get a new searcher. Granted, they've had a searcher since Opus 6 that luckily searched by job or category,
Yeah,
or wasn't, or not category, job or name.
jobber name, yeah.
Wasn't an EX burst, but it was a pretty big forward. He only 8K, which wasn't as big compared to Tenzin coming up, which just shows you
Yeah.
kind of power creep. With also a built-in ability that says your job and name monks do not become dull by your opponent's summons or abilities, which is kind of nice. But with Ice getting out of control effects that just dull freeze characters,
Yeah.
it would have been nice to see him protect the back row too. The Ursula they got has a pretty sweet effect that you can just pull stuff back, which is nice. But being kind of weak as well and having to buff her up somehow, hopefully not by using her own effect to sack multiple monks, you just don't get much from sacking yourself. If they had monks that had abilities that got buffs or did stuff when they were sent from field to grave, it would just make them feel a lot
Oh, that
better. I
would be
wouldn't care.
great. Yeah, like if you threw a monk and then you got the Ursula effect and then that monk gave you something, that would be
Yeah,
pretty crazy.
yeah. If they had something just small, maybe like a Viking type effect, where if it was sent to the grave, you draw a card or
Hmm.
get to reduce something's power. There's something little to go alongside the effect of actually sacking your monks.
Yeah.
And granted, in Opus 12, they did get another backup monk that gets to add any monk from your graveyard back to your hand, which gives them recursion on top of recursion within their archetype, on top of a searcher as well. Gives them a nice little edge. And honestly, the Opus 11 backup monk that you can sack it and pay it Earth and hit something for 3k times the number of monks
Yeah.
is probably one of the best monks in the archetype, if I do say so myself. Most of my monk builds are around that as opposed to the Ursula. It just feels so much better because it's one of those that just counts characters. So if you just have 4 other monk backups, you're just hitting something for 12,000.
Right. Yeah. Well, and Ursula, like I really like Ursula's design. It's to me, it's an example of like it's good design, but they kind of missed the boat on the balance. Like I understand why she's not 8 or 9K. I get that they didn't want you to be able to throw a single monk and like take out a forward because yeah, that probably would have been too strong. However, at the same time, I think they kind of undercorrected her, and she's so weak that like you said, you almost have to absorb a monk first to be able to throw one. Yeah, so it's kind of a shame maybe she should have been a 6K, a 7K, whatever. Or maybe you said, maybe just having monks that when they went to the break zone, if that had an effect, maybe that would feel good enough on its own to kind of raise the caliber. Because again, you're still sacking off your own characters, which is a pretty big deal. So like you got to get a good return for that. And again, Monk has a tiny bit of name clash too. Is that I think all the Yangs are pretty good, but usually the one people want to play is the one that brings Ursula for free. There's that great Opus 9 Yang that makes it so when a monk attacks, it like does damage on its power, but it's hard to play
Give
that when you want
brave.
the other Yang. Yeah, and there's another Yang that's just a big body. So yeah, that one. And then the funny thing is there's some non-Earth monks too. Like Sabin is technically a monk. Tifa. Yeah,
Four
yeah,
fire monks.
yeah. There's 4 fire monks. Tifa
3 of them are saving.
could be a monk. Even though they call her a martial artist, but maybe they just don't want to push her into that. So yeah,
Granted, you could use combo Ursula with other cards, but you could do that with any of these cards. We're
right.
just talking about this one specifically by itself, the way it's built along with the rest of the archetype, how it doesn't truly support that kind of effect.
Right. Well, and Monks is one of the few sets that doesn't have a searcher, right? And again, Brandon and I mentioned this before.
They have Matt.
Well, they have, sorry, they don't have like a backup searcher. They don't have like,
Yeah.
your Mana or your King of Burmecia. And I don't want to homogenize everything at the same time, especially in Monks, because Ursula is so key to Monks. Because I've played some Monk games where I can't draw Ursula or can't draw like a Kolka to fetch her out, and like it just feels like half a deck, like because you just got all these Monk guys that don't do anything on their own. So, I don't want to homogenize it at the same time. Like we've seen just how helpful it is to have those searchers that pull them out. So Monks really could probably use one of those.
Absolutely.
Well, someone who is a bit better now, as of Opus 12 especially, and they started Opus 11, and that's our Samurai. Woo! Shink! I've been playing Ghost of Tsushima this year. Great video game. And Samurais, they again, in Opus 11, they started labeling card name and job name. Because again, I'll always bring up the Heian example. If Heian has the backup Samurai on his field, he doesn't get his buff. And what kind of sense does that make? That like he has Samurai, he can have Samurai on the field with him. He's like, oh, I don't have any Samurai around. It just doesn't make any sense. He has to have a job Samurai, so it's got to be Gosetsu or, Aroha. So they got Cyan in Opus 11, which, again, he's your searcher. He can search any Samurai on a forward, on an EX burst, and that probably would have been good on its own. But now then he has this effect, this kind of anthem that says, hey, anytime any Samurai attacks, we're cleaving the board based on the number of Samurai. So he encourages you to build into these Samurai that, hey, the more of us you get, the bigger that cleave is. And like you said, like you pointed out earlier, what if it was only Cyan could do that? How much worse it would be? No, he makes all of the Samurai a threat. Like, he was great. And then Opus 12, we got Tenzin, who, when I read the card, I thought he sounded good. I was like, this reads great. And then when I played him, dude, he plays even better than he reads. Because it just... even if they immediately kill him, like the moment he comes down, he is at the very least, assuming you have a Samurai in your break zone, he's going to pull back any Samurai you want of 3 or less. Maybe you pull back Cyan and then you go get another Tenzin. But if he lives, I mean, we've seen people jam him out turn 1, and if he's brave, so he's never going to dull, so they can't go under him or over him. He's going to be swinging every turn for this big 9k body, and then he's revealing 5 cards at the end of every turn and just adding value. Like, he's so good. He's so good.
Is very good. And yeah, whenever he leaves, doesn't matter how he leaves or where he goes, he just gets to add a monk or a samurai. God, I'm still on monks. A samurai of 3 or less from your grave back to your hand. And compare him to Matt. Even though Tenzin's not actually a searcher, he does help you dig. They're both 6 drops within their archetype, but Tenzin's a 9k and just feels like he does infinitely more than Matt, who's an 8k.
Yeah.
Cyan being a forward searcher for the archetype rather than a backup searcher almost feels a little bit better, because since he's so much easier to remove, you can just jam another one out there.
Yeah.
When Tenzin dies, you just add him back. You can play him again, grab another Tenzin. And he's also so cheap, just a 3-drop.
Yeah. Oh, and they got that new Samurai backup too in Opus 12. And again, even though I wasn't that big on the effect, like it was
just for the name.
Yeah, I underestimated how nice it is just to have the name or the job, because again, if nothing else, hey, that's a Tenzin target. That's something else you pull off a Tenzin. That's Cyan. He can fetch a backup. Like, they've synergized really well. They really push Samurais in a good direction. And it's interesting because Samurais are in mono fire. Like, almost I think every other archetype on here has at least something in another element, and Samurais are the only ones that are strictly in fire, but they're doing well so far. So man, if they ever branch down to other elements, like, it could be scary.
Yeah, and one of those archetypes that also got a backup is Dragoons.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one of those that they needed a backup. It doesn't matter what it did. I know when it first came out, I looked at it and I was like, cool, we have a backup now. And I didn't even read its effect, and I saw it later and I read it again. I go, that is insane. That is very good. Just being able to add any Dragoon from your break zone back to your hand. And we also got a new forward Dragoon, other than the Water Lightning Freya, which adds just a little more water to the Dragoon archetype itself. The new Dragoon that you just reveal a Dragoon from hand, and he gains haste. Or if you reveal 4, you just break a forward.
Feels so good.
I thought initially when I saw that, I was like, that's never going to happen. And then I realized just how many Dragoons there were and how many you can jam into a deck that aren't bad. And I've been hit with that several times. And I'm a believer.
It
I
feels great because there's no
definitely changed my
cost.
tune. No,
Yeah.
I definitely changed my tune. I was like, cool, you have a handful of Dragoons. What do I care? And then you just play them, and they're all really good Dragoons.
Well, and again,
Especially the
imagine if that card said card name Dragoon only. Suddenly you got a bunch you can't reveal. Like, yeah, that's what makes it good.
there's only a couple. There's probably way more than a couple. Kane, Estinian, Aranea,
Aranea.
Dragoons that are just generically insane,
Yeah,
and
great
then
cards on their own.
add them to the archetype just makes them so much better.
Mm-hmm. The YYT
That
guy mentioned that in his video was that, he was like Samurai or whoever he's talking about, they could use a card that's just a great card on its own, but then it also happens to be a Samurai or it happens to be a Monk. And Dragoon is a perfect example of that, is that Estinian's just a great card. Aranea is great. Like, you can play those in any lightning deck you want. But they also happen to be Dragoons, so they also fit into this archetype, which means they get buffs off of the Kane that buffs off of Rosa, or they get, buff. They can be pulled back with that Dragoon backup. The Kane, the 8-drop, great card on his own. It also happens to be a Dragoon, so you can mix them in that way. And, I kind of underestimated that Dragoon backup when I first saw it, because I was like, I hadn't processed how nice it is to just have a jobber name that fits it. Because, like, the Water Freya, who says she gets haste if you control another Dragoon. Until this point, you always had to have another forward out. You had to Barbara out, whoever. And but now you can play her off of just that backup. She's got haste. She's going in. She's shrinking something by 2. I was like, wow, I didn't appreciate how good that was.
Yeah, it adds to the Opus 3 Freya as well. They're
Oh,
special
yeah.
on Cherry Blossom, so it just counts all characters of Dragoon, which confirmed recently that's how that works.
Mm-hmm.
Because King of Burmecia was eroded a while back that people kind of forgot about, that it only searches a forward, not just any Dragoon.
Yeah.
Not the new, Opus 6 Dragoon that gets +2 for every other Dragoon you control also counts the backup.
Yeah.
So if he's the only forward, but you happen to have all 3 Dragoon backups, he's just a 2-drop 11 case sitting there.
Yeah. I've seen some matches, people have all 3 of the Dragoon backup. And again, he's multi-playable, so it's not like you're limited to 1. And him, and then they'll have 2 of the 2-drops in there. And so it's like, what, plus 8,000? So you've got this 13,000 body just sitting there like, sup, what are you going to do? Like, it's crazy.
Little guy.
Yeah.
And funny enough, Barbara is one of those very, very few cards that just gives haste to characters rather than just forwards.
Oh, yeah.
So if you were somehow able to play the Dragoon backup and then use a card to untap it, you can use its effect immediately.
Yeah.
Something I've always wanted to do.
You'll have to let me know if you do it. Yeah, I wasn't sure, but these 2 Dragoons alone just show that, like, I think in kind of a theme I'll mention definitely at the end too, is just like, if you give them good cards, if you give them support, like, that's what matters. Like,
Yeah.
That's what
And,
elevates them.
The archetypes themselves can only get better from here because it's not like they're ever just going to stop printing cards.
Right.
Hopefully they don't stop printing cards for those archetypes.
Yeah.
It's just, the other cards outside of those archetypes, like the meta cards that they'll print that would just make these decks a little worse.
Sure.
Just
Yeah.
to see less play.
Yeah. No, they've been great. They've been great. Speaking of great, my new favorite deck and my new favorite archetype is Warriors of Light. Now, I was playing Warriors of Light back in Opus 10 when that Light Refia came out. I thought it was a really neat effect, and you had the Sarah backup anthem, and so I was playing then. But man, our savior came to us in Opus 12 on a cloud of destruction and angelic power, and that's Ferris. And Ferris is a great example of not doing name clash, because there are 2 other Ferrises in the game, and even though they were both technically Job Warrior of Light, nothing about them fit in a Warrior of Light deck. Like, I think they were very 5 focused. I think they were both very, like, category 5.
One of them searched Lena or Sildra.
That's right, yeah. Yeah, so we hadn't had imagine if Ferris had been called a Refia, or, Wool, another Wool or something. She was Ferris, and the way they designed her, like, I just appreciate the more and more the more I play her, in that she's super focused on Warrior of Light, but she has 2 great effects, and she has an offensive effect and a defensive effect, which is if they have forwards and you've got bodies, it nukes a forward for 2k for every Warrior of Light, but that's on entry. So unlike Ace, who's got to wait to attack, it's any time a Warrior of Light enters. Fantastic. Hey, they don't have any forwards? No big deal. Your next Warrior of Light that comes in is 2 cheaper. 2, and that counts the backups, any backup ones you have. Like, she's just incredible, and she's so smartly designed, and, like, I just absolutely love the card, and it's just made playing this set that I've enjoyed so much more fun. But again, like with Rain or the Monks of the Ninjas, we didn't just get Ferris. We got a new Soul, a new Aegis, a new Dusk, who I really have enjoyed using, a new backup Sarah, who's way better, which is a shame because I always wanted to make that 7-cost Sarah work, but the 6 cost I think is just way more consistent. And so all of them came into it, and like Aegis, I go back and forth on which Aegis to use because they're both great. I really love them. Like, so it's nice to have more cards, more choices. They fit in with the archetype. You know, Soul is a 2K body, but everyone's scared of him. I've had people constantly freezing him, wasting their removal on my Soul because because they don't want me to swing in and then search out any Warrior of Light I can. Like, it's just been so crazy and so fun, and it's made past cards better, which I always love to see. Like the Light Wool from Opus 5 that, you know, he flips over 5 when he comes in and then when he dies. I mean, that was always fine, but now with Ferris, if he dies, hey, not only am I bringing something back, it's going to trigger Ferris again. Like, it's just, they did such a good job with them in this Opus.
Yeah, and there also are one of the archetypes that have a Searcher and Recursion that
Yes.
are both EX bursts, which just adds to that. And they're spread across 4 different colors, technically 5 if you count Maya.
Yeah.
And no, I don't.
Yeah.
So you can just build it in whatever variant you want, because I don't think there's there's good cards in each of those colors. Not as many in Wind, but it's still pretty good.
Yeah. Oh, my favorite version is the fire water focus version, but we've seen people using her with like Barts, the new party Barts, and the new Lena, like, because they're Job Warriors of Light, so they're using it kind of like in this wind water party deck, and just here comes Ferris in it. It's crazy, like the applications that people have been using it in. It's been great.
God, these cards are wild.
Yeah.
Yeah, they did Warriors of Light real good, and who they didn't do so good, Summoners.
Oh man, Brandon's gonna have to talk because I don't really even know what summoners are, if they even are a thing. Tell me about them, Brandon.
Summoners were, I was so hyped for Summoners in Opus, I think 7, when they gave us the backup Braska that says all of your Summoners cost 1 less. And it wasn't just forwards, it was backups as well. It's like, oh man, I gotta see what Summoners we have because I'm excited. And we only had, I think we had a handful at the time, but nothing was great because 5 of them were card name Una.
Yeah.
Now I think we have 6 Unas in the archetype. Still have 5, but we also have 5 Icos. That's just another one with huge name clash.
Mm-hmm.
And then in Opus, 11? That's right, because I didn't get 11. I always forget what's in that. It was Opus 11 where we started getting a lot more Summoners, and I was like, oh boy, here we go. They got an Ico backup that searches Summoners, EX burst. I was like, nice. We're headed in the right direction. And then that was it. Every other Summoner card, in my opinion, that they printed was just not great. I feel like the Summoner backups are way better than the forwards. We have just not a lot going for them. There's only 8 different Summoners, 8 different named Summoners, even though there's 23 cards in the entire archetype. We have 5 Rydias and 5 Icos and Unis. It makes up over half the archetype, 2/3 of it, in just those. And I gotta tell you, they just don't really do much.
Yeah.
One of the neatest ones was Unaleska that says your summons cost 1 less for every forward you have, which is neat. But that's really it. When she comes into play, you get to take a summon from Breakzone and put it to your bottom, but I don't really want to do that most of the time because I usually recur my summons and just play them again.
Yeah.
And Unaleska just has this really neat effect, but that's all she does. She just sits there, and it's just pretty stagnant. You got a new Garnet that has a decent effect whenever you cast a summon. She gets a counter, and then you can remove a counter and give something +2, but then she has another effect where you can tap her, reveal a random card in your hand. If it's a summon, you cast it for free. But then that's wanting you to keep your hand low to guarantee that you can hit a summon, unless your hand is just full of summons. And you don't want to keep your hand low, because then you feel like you're just playing from behind.
Yeah.
Unless that summon's just going to reset the game like Arc.
You know, it's funny because summoners too in the video games, like that's like the job. That's like the premier thing because the summons or the icons, the primals or whichever version you're watching, the espers, whatever they're called, they're so important to the story so often. They're such a core part of Final Fantasy, Shiva, Ifrit, Ramu, Odin, Bahamut. So it's funny that this they just can't get this job or this archetype right. And you just said something that kind of had a light bulb moment for me, where you said once they're on the field, they just don't really do anything. And kind of thinking over all these archetypes, the ones that are really good, they have an effect that can be repeated. Think of Rain from World of Final Fantasy. Everyone gets haste, and there's a repeated 4K ping. Look at Ferris. Every time one enters, you get one of the 2 triggers. Cyan, every time a Cyan attacks. Ninjas, every time a ninja enters. So I think, Scions, at least everybody gets haste. I think these ones that need to succeed, and I guess Dragoons is missing it too, I think they really need something that kind of acts like this engine that gives you this repeated effect. Not this, hey, Unalesca entered, you pulled one summon at the bottom of your deck, which you then have to somehow go search out, and then that's it. Now she's just sitting there. Oddly enough, the best summoner card is Braska's Final Aeon, because he can repeatedly is going to blast something when he's picked or attacks, or you can discard him. So that's kind of funny. But I think archetypes in general, they summoners could really use something. Hey, every time you do this, benefit. Because when you just have this one, hey, it does this thing once, and then that's it, and you're done. You're like, oh, well.
Yeah, the Braska making the cards cheaper to play is super nice, but I don't really want to play anything that's not a summoner backup. I just feel really bad playing any of them. Unalesca is the only other thing that does anything with summoners themselves. Just being able to make them cheaper, or make your summons cheaper.
Right.
They could do so much more with it.
They certainly have nowhere to go but up. Maybe one day. Well, who did get some love this set is Knights. We got a new Beatrix. Was that it? Did we get somebody else? Gawain. New Beatrix and Gawain. And technically the new Steiner, too. Knights. So Knights are interesting. That has definitely been the one archetype, whereas it's been like, wow, Dragoons feel really great now. Samurais feel great. Warriors light. Knights are kind of the ones I'm still kind of like, I don't know. They're interesting. Beatrix is interesting, but... So I have a buddy who plays them in strictly fire water, and that just seems kind of okay. And we know some people online who play them with lightning, with Ramza, and that kind of almost seems to be the way to go because it seems like they really lack removal. And, he was kind of comparing Beatrix to Edge, whereas, Beatrix has this repeated effect. Once per turn, you can take 2 cost off of any knight, and then anytime a knight enters, your field's popping up. And man, we've seen those fields just boom, boom, boom. There's a plus 8k boost on the field all of a sudden, which is great with something like the Opus 5 Legend Ramza. And Gawain, in theory, he should be great, but maybe he just doesn't have any great targets right now, because, you probably search out Beatrix for sure as your water if you don't have her, but if you do have her, what do you just grab a Steiner, I guess? And there aren't many great fire knights. I think the Garland is okay, but there's nothing oh man, they're in trouble now because I'm getting this. So knights are kind of a weird one for me right now.
Yeah, there's even though there's not too many knights in lightning, it just feels like it adds so much more to the deck than the fire aspect of it. Because you got Duke Tana, your searcher, which could incidentally grab you one of the 2 Earth Knight backups. There's a Ramza Knight backup. I always forget about that one. But you're not playing the backup Ramza over the forward Ramza. That one's just so much better. And Beatrix, the Knight stuff usually is only counting Job Knight, even though there's only a couple forward named Knights, but it'd be nice to just, include them. Just because.
Weird. I thought they were getting past that, and yet here in Opus 12, no, Job only. We don't want these fake guys called Knight.
Some things never change. But yeah, the Ramza just adds way more, I feel, than or the lightning just adds way more than the fire does. I've seen tricolor builds that are just lightning, water, earth, because you have more earth knights than you do fire knights. Your fire knight targets are usually just Garland or Steiner or the Rain if you want to play light rain for a special, which isn't always, but I don't know if it's worth playing the fire just for that.
Right. Yeah, they're kind of in a weird spot. All the Earth Knights are like Delita, right? Well, then you said there were some backup ones, too.
Yeah, you got Brandalus and Pelennor and Sigvardus and Heretical Knight Garland.
Oh, that's right, yeah. Yeah, that's kind of funny how Earth has a few more. Yeah, they're in it. I would like to see them push further, but at least right now, it feels like you have to lean into Lightning. But it sounds like they could definitely use some better Fire Knights.
Yeah, if they just gave us a set of just a bunch of knights that were only fire with good effects, then I could definitely see fire being much bigger in the deck itself.
Interesting. Man, okay, so knights are kind of, they're not quite there yet, but I wonder if they could use a good backup, too. Like you said, the Searchers and Lightning, and what if they had, they've got Ovalia, but standard unit knight backup that blah, 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 blah. Although if Beatrix only says Job, I don't know. So knights could use some work. You know who also needs work, which is you'd think would have been a thing after Opus 10 because they released what felt like 20 cards for this set. It was probably more like 10 or 5, but which is Sky Pirates. Like some people thought that was going to take off in Opus 10, and it didn't. Why didn't it,
Did
Brandon?
it did very well in title, and that's just because
That's true.
I name clash. Name clash, I feel, kind of hurts the deck a lot. You don't have to. You have what, 4 Frans, 8 Vaughns, just a whole bunch to compete. Just a lot of Vaughns. Uh, the Sky Pirates themselves just had very average effects, and they were either underpowered or just didn't do it. They all usually required. I didn't play them enough, so I don't remember all of
Oh,
their effects.
so for example, the backup Tomage, which was one of the new ones, he was a 2 CP water backup. You could tap him to drain someone's power by 1,000, so a 1k power reduction. But to do that, you had to have 3 job Sky Pirate forwards. Why 3 forwards for a 1k reduction? Like that makes no sense to me. What's the point of these backups if they don't go off of them?
They got a Fran forward too that I believe counted all your Sky Pirate characters, right?
Yes, that one counted
Got a
characters. It gave her
1K buff.
power based on, and then when she attacked, when I first read it, I was like, oh, when she attacks, she does damage equal to her power. No. She does damage based on the Sky Pirate characters. So like basically whatever power buff she got. So if she was a 5k naturally, if she got 5k from 5 other pirates, she'd be 10. But she'd only attack for 5k. Like, huh?
Hmm. God, those cards are weird.
It was weird,
Yeah.
and like even though I liked like Elza and like Philo, both of them required you to have another Sky Pirate forward on the field to get their effect. Rickon only activated everyone but himself in combat. Like again, it was one of those ones that they were still doing that forward mentality. It kind of reminds me of cadets in that way of like, well, no, only the forwarders matter. Like, who cares if your whole backup line is Sky Pirates? Like, you gotta have forwards.
You had too many choices of Balthier and Vaughn to pick from,
Yeah.
and like you said, they just had to count certain forwards, but they had like mediocre effects like drawing a card, which I mean it's not mediocre, but requiring you to have another Sky Pirate in order to do it is underwhelming.
Especially now in Opus 12 when we've seen all the stuff that just draws you cards just cuz. Like, yeah, it just makes it seem like, I don't know. It felt like after Opus 10, they immediately like ramped that straight up.
God, the difference in power.
It's insane. Do you have anything else you want to add on Sky Pirates?
No, I didn't ever had much to say about
Yeah,
them.
that's fair. Yeah, they came in and no one wanted to play with them, and then now they're not
They
a
got
thing
released
anymore.
alongside WAF.
Yeah,
Just made it
yeah.
just outshine.
Fran was such a poor man's reign, poor woman's reign. It's funny. So okay, so kind of talking about archetypes in general. Like, how do you think they are successful? Do you think the YYT guy is right? Is that they're always going to stall out because they require you to focus build so much, or you know, because me, I guess the way I kind of is like I think good cards are just good cards, and like these archetypes can be good as we've seen. You have to give them a good card. They need something like a Tenzin, a Cyan, a Ferris, an RNA, an Edge, like an Alice. You need something that helps the
Just
archetype.
like a boss monster.
Yeah.
And then just everything
Go ahead.
everything else just slowly supports it, or it gets buffed by everything else and gets effects based on that. That's always nice to have.
Right.
No, I don't think archetypes are bad. Some probably poorly designed. They could always use some work. They all need a searcher.
Yeah.
That's a no-brainer. And yeah, they don't all have to have the exact same cards because then that's no fun. And it's just like, oh, well, I
Sure.
prefer this one over this just because I like a ninja. Does not necessary, but just give them something. They can all have their own unique stuff, like giving Edge shuriken counters. That's pretty unique. I don't think any of the other archetypes have counters like that.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And there's also very few cards that do have counters, but
Give every archetype a counter. I'm going to counter monsters now. No, you're right. Well, and the thing is, too, something I find appealing about archetypes from a balance perspective is that I think you can make archetype cards stronger, like slightly above curve than normal cards, because you can lock them into their archetype. So, hey, this is an above curve effect, but, it can only be done in ninjas. It can only be done in samurai, warriors of light, summoners. So therefore, that helps the balance of it. Like, look at Broska's Final Aeon. He was such a terror in Opus 11 because he could go anywhere. What if he was restricted to fire? What if he was restricted to summoners? still crazy strong card, but at least you're only going to see him in those decks. And in general, you know, the game these days, like color fixing's gotten so easy, you kind of just see a lot of these good cards to the deck, where people just jam good cards into every deck because they fit everywhere. You know, March Ritz Kadaj was like that.
The Yu-Gi-Oh days.
Right, yeah. But you know, something like Ferris, you know, what if Ferris just said anytime a forward entered, make your next forward, you know, that would be hard. Like, it was so dumb. But when you say no, it's restricted to Warriors, or it's restricted to Warriors of Light, okay, you get it. Like, so that's kind of how I see it, for especially for a balance point of view.
Making them archetype specific as opposed to just generically good. Like Opus 10 Ifrit just gives 2k to all your fires after dealing 8k. If it only buffed a certain archetype, then it would just see certain play.
Right.
Only a little less play, maybe. The Cadets, I think, are one of the only archetypes that have summons unique to them.
Yeah.
They have like their own meh kind of effect to them, but then they get additional effects if you have a cadet forward in play.
Yeah.
Which makes them kind of unique. I wouldn't go out of my way to play cadets just to play any of those summons, but
right.
But just the fact that they have them makes them a little more interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I like archetypes a lot. Again, I think it's one of the things that brings people to the game, you know, because if they're a Final Fantasy fan, oh, I love being a Dragoon in Final Fantasy. I want to play the Dragoons. Oh, I love, you know, Scions. You know, I want to play Scions. I knew that was one of the things that drew me in. So, because a lot of these archetypes in title are so fun. Because, now granted, that's more tied to category, but still, like, you know, Cadets in title is incredible. That's one of the strongest title things ever, because you just play all the aces and then just go ham. Go ahead.
And that's another thing. It's so much easier to just push category-based stuff as opposed to jobs, because, you know, there's way more characters in a game than there are within that archetype, that class.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that just makes it a little harder as well to try and just base it around the archetype instead.
Well, I hope they have nowhere to go but up. Let us know.
Definitely.
Thank you for watching, and let us know if, leave in the comments, what are your favorite archetypes? What are some things you think could help the archetypes that aren't very good? You know, is there an archetype you think is too good? Should it be brought down somehow? But yeah, just...
Mannequins.
Yeah, right, yeah, mannequins, yeah. Oh yeah, that was a thing, apparently, I guess. Nobody plays that. Brandon, thank you as always for joining me on here. Had a great time, and... loved your thoughts on it. Gave me a lot of things to think about. So, any closing thoughts?
For having me.
Oh, absolutely.
No, I'm just very excited to see what kind of stuff they do with these archetypes, and what other archetypes we'll see in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. It would be fun to watch Crystal Cups one day. Ooh, top 4. Here's a Dragoon coming in, you know, storming the field versus a Samurai. Like, that would be really fun to see. So, all right, everybody. Merry Christmas. And Happy New Year and all that. And see you next time we all play FFTCG.
See ya.
Bye.